All right, well, first, I just want to thank you all so much for coming out today. We've got a super exciting agenda ahead and a lot of great time for you all to spend with each other. So I'm going to kick things off with a presentation that answers two very simple questions. First, who is North Island Ventures? And second, what does North Island Ventures stand for? So it's going to be a little bit of a fluffy presentation. You're going to get the hard stuff from James after this. And to answer the first question, I'll start with myself. So as many of you know, I started my career very briefly as a lawyer at a big law firm. And I learned a lot in that job, stuff that I still use today. But the truth is, I very much disliked it. And it wasn't merely because the hours were super long or I had no control over my schedule or merely that the work was incredibly dull. It was because I felt like it had no overarching purpose, that the firm that I was at was basically a machine that was optimized to maximize profits per partner. And so I started looking for areas in the world that I could get involved that would actually push the world forward. And fortunately, I discovered Bitcoin. I made my way to this company called Digital Currency Group in 2015, and that was an incredible experience. I made so many amazing connections. I learned how to invest. But even there, I knew that I wanted to do something that was even more aligned with my vision and my values. But I knew that I needed somebody to do it with. And so fortunately, in 2018, I was introduced to my partner, James. And we were connected through his father, Glenn, who was one of the founders of Silver Lake and an early board member at DCG. You'll get to hear from him later. And James and I had dinner in early 2019, and it was one of these interactions where when you know, you know. It was not merely that we had this super synergistic skill set, but rather that we had an obvious set of shared values. See, we didn't look at crypto as just a playground for trading assets, but as a technology that could increase economic efficiency in the world and increase economic freedom in the world, and thereby create broad prosperity. And so we launched this firm in 2020, and I'm proud to say, we have 3 funds, about $600 million under management today, but I'm much more proud of the people that we've surrounded ourselves with. And that starts with our team. So on the venture side, we've got our spectacular investors, Greg and Rob, who many of you have interacted with. On the public market side, we've got Sam and Mike, who spearhead what we call the NIV Voyager Fund, which is our hedge fund. These guys are 2 of the best researchers in the game. And then we've got our COO, Charles, our general counsel, Shivank, and our chief technology officer, Dave. All of them have been with us for years, and we would not be able to do any of the things we do without them. So that's our team, but I actually view the boundaries of the firm as much broader. And so obviously we've got our portfolio companies. We've now invested in 60 companies all over the world, working in every nook and cranny of crypto. It's a hugely diverse group of founders, but they have in common what we call the 3 I's. This is what we look for in founders, and that's ultra high intelligence, sustained intensity, and unquestionable integrity. And that's our model, and those are the folks that we've seen be successful, and those are the folks that we've had the great pleasure of partnering with. And then we have over 100 limited partners in our funds. We've got everything from some of my best friends in college to one of the biggest sovereign wealth funds in the world. And I know that a lot of GPs like to complain about their investors. Investor relations and fundraising can seem like a distraction, but that has not been our experience at all. Our LPs have been super supportive, loyal, and helpful through some pretty crazy market cycles. And so we're extremely grateful for those relationships and excited to keep building them for many years to come. And then we've got our co-investors. These are just the logos of the folks who are going to show up at some point today. And I think one of the things I'm most grateful for in this job is that some of my best friends in the world are other investors in this space who we get to collaborate with and win together. And then there's a whole nother category of partners. Some folks might think of them merely as service providers, but we wouldn't be able to do any of the things we do without these folks. And so in terms of who we are, whether you guys think about it like this or not, and I guess whether you like it or not, I view all of you and all of our partners as an intricate part of North Island Ventures. So that's the first question. Now, to answer the second question, I'm going to go on a little bit of a digression and talk about an author whose books I've been a little bit obsessed with recently. So this guy is a Scottish neuroscientist and philosopher named Ian McGilchrist. And he's written, I think, 2 seminal books. The first is called The Master and His Emissary, and the second is called The Matter with Things. And by the way, as with our last summit, we're doing a book giveaway today. There's 5 options. The Master and His Emissary is one of them, so if this resonates, you might want to grab a copy. And what McGilchrist has written about is the brain. More specifically, he's written about the fact that the brain has 2 hemispheres. Now, the fact that it even has 2 hemispheres is a little bit of a mystery, because the purpose of the brain is really to facilitate as many connections between neurons as possible. And species that have more neurons, more connections, are more intelligent and more successful from an evolutionary perspective. So why would you divide the brain? Well, what we've discovered is that the brain is divided because each hemisphere specializes. And what the left hemisphere specializes in is spotlight attention. So very narrow focus. So in a state of nature, what the left hemisphere would do is lock into prey and never lose sight of it. The right hemisphere, on the other hand, specializes in broad awareness. So again, in a state of nature, it would be constantly scanning for a variety of opportunities and threats. Okay, what's so interesting about this? What's interesting is that it turns out that the hemispheres of the brain have dramatically different ways of both viewing and approaching the world. And we know this from thousands of studies done on individuals who have deficits in either one hemisphere or the other. So for example, if somebody had a stroke or a lesion in their left hemisphere, you could study and monitor their behavior via experiments, and you would learn something about how the right hemisphere views and approaches the world in isolation and vice versa. So here's what we learn about their personalities. The left hemisphere is reductionist. It views the world as composed of pieces, part of a machine-like system that is fundamentally inanimate, dead. And it's overconfident. It stakes strong opinions. It rejects countervailing evidence, and it often veers into straight-up delusion. And it's control-oriented. It's grasping and power-seeking. The right, on the other hand, is holistic. It views the world as a flowing, deeply interconnected whole. And it's realistic. So it's much more comfortable with ambiguity, nuance, and uncertainty. And it's empathetic. It doesn't view the world as a machine, but rather as a place filled with living, breathing human beings and cultures. And so what McGilchrist believes is that over the past few centuries, the world has increasingly rewarded left hemispheric thinking and behavior. And that in so doing, the left hemisphere is basically taking over the world. And again, it doesn't mean that the structure of the brain is actually changing, but rather that the modes of attention and perception and behavior associated with the left hemisphere are increasingly prevalent, and that this is the source of many of our ills across a wide variety of domains. So, how is this relevant to crypto? Well, I think it's extremely relevant. I think that many people in this industry view crypto as its own little world, as a playground for optimizing short-term gain, in which they just stake the strongest opinion they possibly can and basically reject the broader world or any countervailing opinions. But the way the right would look at crypto is that it is a small part of a much bigger world, filled with humans and domains and areas that it can have a big impact on, but that can also have a big impact on crypto. All All right, so when I think about the firm that we want to build, and this is aspirational. We're a young firm, we're still a relatively small firm, but we're an ambitious firm, and so I think you have to have a set of principles that you stick to. We want to bring the right hemispheric approach. And so to us, that means big picture thinking. That means not merely viewing crypto in isolation, but understanding its place in the world. And it means building long-term relationships. For us, ultimately, everything we do is about human beings. It's not merely about numbers on a screen. And it means that we care about principles that transcend profit. So yes, we're an investment firm. We want to make a lot of money. We want to make a lot of money for our LPs, ourselves, and we hope that our founders are tremendously successful. But ultimately, money is a means and not an end, and so we always want to do this in ways that we can be proud of. And that means that there's some things that happen in this space that we're not going to get involved with. But it also means that there's many things, where entrepreneurs are actually changing the world that we get extremely excited about. So we've designed today's agenda to showcase this philosophy. We're not merely going to be talking about the latest crypto hype. We're going to be talking about a number of topics that I think are going to be relevant to everybody here. And those include leadership, politics, economics, culture, innovation, and prosperity more broadly. All right, so here's the specific agenda. Our first outside talk is going to be with Matt Harris and Dan Harris. So Matt is a longtime fintech venture capitalist at Bain Capital Ventures. I've had the pleasure of knowing him for 10 years because he was on the investment committee at Digital Currency Group. And he's going to be interviewing his brother Dan, who is an author and podcaster and one of the most well-known proponents of mindfulness and meditation for normal secular people in the United States. And by the way, his book, 10% Happier, is another one of the options. After that, I'm going to be interviewing Richie Torres via Zoom because they're in session. And Richie is somebody I'm a huge fan of. I think what makes him so special is that there's many people in Washington who think that you have to choose between being pro-innovation or caring about low-income groups, marginalized groups. And Richie is from one of the poorest districts in the United States, and he completely rejects this dichotomy. He's been one of the most active, pro-crypto advocates in crypto, and at the same time, he cares deeply about his constituents. So whether you agree with him on everything or not, I think we need more people like him in Washington. And then after lunch, we're going to have a talk on economics with our chairman, Glenn, who I mentioned he was one of the founders of Silver Lake, but he's also been deeply involved in the macro world for many years. He's the founder of the Hutchins Center for Fiscal and Monetary Policy at the Brookings Institute. And he's also was a board member at the New York Fed for many years. And while he was on the board of the New York Fed, Bill Dudley was president. So Bill is a PhD, 20 years at Goldman Sachs, 10 years as president of the New York Fed. He is one of the leading experts on monetary policy, financial regulation, and the inner workings of the Fed, all topics that I think are highly relevant, and he's a very entertaining speaker as well. And they're going to be interviewed by Steve Leisman, who is a senior reporter at CNBC. Many of you will recognize him from television. That's going to be a fun talk. And after that, we've got one that might be a little out of left field for some of you, but this guy by the name of Paul Scalis is better known as Lindy Man on Twitter. And he is he's an author and a blogger who has popularized this notion of the Lindy effect, which basically states that things that have persisted throughout time are more likely to persist. So in essence, he studies what trends will last. And I think for those of us who are investors and entrepreneurs, that's a highly relevant topic. All right, after that, we've got, at 2 o'clock, we just inserted a new talk. Mike Horton from GeoNet is going to be interviewed by Rob. I was just talking to him out there, and I figured we'd slot him in because he's got a lot of exciting updates on his business. And then, unfortunately, Mike Silagaze was a late dropout because he had a very important meeting, but his number 2, Rock, is going to be here. And he's going to be interviewed by Sam on our team. And so that's going to be on what we call building a real on-chain business. So what do I mean by real? Well, EtherFi, I'm sure many of you know, is one of the largest DeFi protocols by TVL. But what's much more exciting about it to us is that they are pioneering a on-chain neobank that actually offers better saving, spending, and investment products for people all over the world. That product's called EtherFi Cash. It's growing. And so I think this is one of the most promising on-chain businesses out there. And it's also a real business because it makes significant revenue. They, I think right now are at about 80 million in ARR, 30 to 40 million in profits, and they have mechanisms in place to return those profits to token holders. All right, and then our last talk for the day is with Eric Bryman. He is the CEO of a company called Prospera. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with Balaji's network state thesis, the idea that there's going to be these communities that form online that eventually get land somewhere and try and create a new nation state and get actual recognition from other countries. Eric has been working on this idea since years before Balaji even started talking about it. And he started with land in the real world. So Prospera is a governance platform that operates special economic zones. And they have their first zone on an island in Honduras called Roatan. And they have sovereignty there with respect to everything except Honduran criminal law. And they're building a real city from the ground up. And so Eric is just an incredible thinker. I think he's maybe the only person in the world who can pull this off. And so that's going to be our last talk. He's going to be interviewed by Greg. You're going to want to stick around for that one. So I'll close with this. If you want to know who we are, spend time with the people here today. And if you want to know what we stand for, get comfortable in your seats and enjoy these amazing talks. So thank you again for coming out. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my partner, James.